Would you like me to talk about your favourite episode of Smallville here on the DCEU Daily here on Movies TV Mad? All you have to do is go to the comments down below and name the episode you want me to talk about. Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And welcome to Friday's edition of the DCEU Daily. On today's show, we get the details of a comic book legend, Grant Morrison, defending Ezra Miller. Yes, but he also makes some very vital concessions in these details. We'll get to it in a moment. After that, I'll be focusing on one of my favourite Smallville episodes. In fact, one of my favourite episodes of Janir television of all time, the Smallville Season 7 episode, Descent, which finally saw Lex Luthor murder the villainous Lionel Luthor. It was an amazing episode, and it was the keeping of a promise. But first, let's get the details of comic book legend Grant Morrison defending Ezra Miller. The Flash writer supports Ezra Miller following troubling allegations. In just over a year, Warner Bros. Will finally release its long-awaited solo movie, The Flash. You keep on believing that, lad. You keep on believing that. Which has been through countless developmental problems, mainly because of Ezra Miller, by the way, for nearly a decade. Already, unfortunately, those problems continue to persist today due to the issues surrounding its leading actor, Ezra Miller, who's played the leading role since 2016's Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. Miller has been the centre of some disturbing press the last couple of years after some unfortunate controversy off camera, with new accusations having arisen in the past few. Most recently, the actor behind Barry Allen responded to grooming accusations with a barrage of memes and pictures on Instagram, although Miller then deleted the entire Instagram account only one day later, proving his guilt yet again. Although they are leading arguably the DCEU's most anticipated solo movie next year, think about this for a minute. He was meant to be leading the DCEU because they were going to reboot the franchise with this Flash movie. So he was going to be the lead character, not even researching him and making sure he was psychologically, capable enough of doing that, because he clearly isn't. Is he? How is he going to do marketing? Look, this movie isn't happening anyway. Forget about it. But this is just so WB. Miller's actions have become more than worrisome as the Flash actor remains in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. Even so, one of their former collaborators shared their own thoughts about the experience working with Miller, along with their hopes for the best to work itself out. Imagine this for a minute, right? Grant Morrison is saying, let's hope this all works out for the best. Mate, Grant, my Scottish legend, right? You know what he's accused of. He's accused of grooming. He's accused of abuse against women, violence against women, right? Sorry, not he, but they. And you're saying, oh well, let's just hope this works out for the best. You mean you hope he gets away with it? Well, he won't. Rolling Stone spoke with Grant Morrison, a former writer on the Flash movie, who has also written many DC comic book runs, including The Flash, and discussed accusations and controversy surrounding Ezra Miller ahead of the solo movie's release on June 2023. Miller is currently in potential legal trouble due to accusations from the family of an 18-year-old, Dakota, Ionize of actor grooming their child. Prior to this, Miller was arrested on 2 separate occasions in a month, once on charges of disorderly conduct and harassment at a Hawaiian karaoke bar, and another time after allegedly assaulting a couple in a nearby area, and then he dived into their window in their apartment and he stole their stuff. Allegedly, of course. It's all in the police report. It's actually true. I mean, it's hard to believe of an elite, Hollywood superstar, but this is his behaviour and conduct because he's getting away with it. So why wouldn't he do it? I mean, we wouldn't be doing it, but this nut job is. Morrison admitted that while they haven't spoken to Miller for a while, the stories that are currently circulating paint Miller as not the person they were. Morrison went on to sport Miller as a super intelligent kid with so many talents during the time they knew him. I know they've had these problems. I haven't spoken to him for a while. That's funny, right? He starts off by calling him they, then he says him. I do that as a mistake as well. For a while, and the last time I spoke was long before this. All I can say is that he's just not the person I know. I've heard stories just like everyone else. I just don't know Ezra. I just don't know. Ezra cut off contact from pretty much everyone for a while. It's not the person they were. So let's be clear here. Grant Morrison is admitting and conceding that Ezra Miller cut off contacts with everyone in his life for a while now. They weren't aggressive in any way. I just thought Ezra was a super intelligent kid with so many talents. So all I can say is that I didn't see that side in any way with them. Of course they're getting desperate now. Toby Emmerich's been on the phone. Grant, I need you, mate. Say something nice in the press. Go on, go on. You've got to say something. So he said this. Look, it's too late for blagging and propaganda. We all know what Ezra Miller is now. And there's no way he can continue in this movie being released starring him. We already know that. It's too late, Toby. You've lost. You're not getting your bonus. Get over it, mate. Morrison also reflected on the unused screenplay for The Flash that they and Miller wrote, together sharing a story about their efforts to make the story better with only a couple of weeks to complete it. Again, ridiculous. Ezra Miller insisted that him and this comic book writer, Grant Morrison, this icon of, he wrote All-Star Superman for fuck's sake, right? This guy's a legend. So they worked together on this script for fucking 2 weeks. That's ridiculous. Sharing a story about their efforts to make the story better with only a couple of weeks to complete it. The story the two developed centered much more on the Flash alone rather than expanding into the greater universe and kickstarting other franchises which Warner Brothers passed on. So let's get this clear. Grant Morrison and Ezra Miller wanted a standalone Flash movie. I agree. This is what it should have been. Now, just because you have a standalone Flash movie, it doesn't mean there can't be a cameo or two, right? But basically, and Andy Muschietti actually admitted this from the beginning, we're using the Flash and his abilities to reboot the universe. So this film was never being made, with the integrity of the character of the Flash and Barry Allen in mind. And that's a huge problem in itself. Well, there had been a few versions, and as far as I remember, Ezra just wasn't quite happy with what he was getting at the time. And he had a lot of ideas. He came to me with a book of ideas, and then we worked together. It really was just the two of us. He came over here to Scotland and hung out. Wow. And we wrote this thing. I really liked it. They only gave us 2 weeks. It was cruelty, it was hardcore. We had to be like the Flash to get this thing done. And they were looking for something quite different. I got paid and it was good fun. It didn't do the job they were looking for, which was to franchise things and set things up. Exactly. And bring other characters in. It was a Flash story. So it wasn't where they wanted to go with the multiverse and stuff. And that was the end of it. So I believe that Ezra Miller was unhappy from this moment. Because one thing I'll say about Ezra, right, I can't condone the way he's acting. But he is passionate about DC and his character. And he was desperate to give us the best movie he could give us, away from his crimes and everything else. The lad genuinely, not the lad, but the person, they wanted to give us the best Flash movie ever. And this is true. And out of desperation, he forced the studio to allow him to go to Scotland so he and Grant could work together. Ezra never wanted the multiverse strategy to be launched via his movie. And he was right to be angry and frustrated because Muschietti, Emmerich and Hamada never had the interests, of the Flash at heart. And Ezra Miller knew this. So from day one of his pitch being rejected, his and Grant Morrison's pitch being rejected, I think this is where the psychological problems begun. And I think this is why the meltdowns were beginning and happening during the shoot of Andy Muschietti's The Flash movie. I can't excuse his behaviour. Clearly, the person has issues. They have issues which weren't addressed by the studio. They could have helped him months and months and months ago, but they didn't. They just used him as another commodity. Of course, the studio has a lot of responsibility in what's exploded. And I'm not suggesting they should have gone with his pitch just so he doesn't have a meltdown. But clearly the movie they made simply wasn't the right way to go. But they wanted to use the Flash's abilities to reboot the universe and start again, because they had to do something right, because as far as they're concerned, the Snyderverse was a non-starter. So they wanted to delete that, reboot everything, and start again. But they had a problem with Miller. And I believe all he's acting out is because of this reason. Not only that, I believe that Ezra Miller is acting this way. Let's just say he's exposing himself because some of the accusations about Dakota were when she was only 12 years old, which means he was doing it many years ago. Which, you know, what, she's 18 now, 17, 16, 15, 14. So that's 6 years ago. So this is not a new thing. This is not just a new meltdown. But I think he may be purposely exposing himself just to expose this movie. Now that is a very interesting theory, and it's a theory, as you guys know, I've had for a very long time. So, hang on, have we got some more? Yeah, there's some more. I thought we finished the article, excuse me. Even though it's been some time since Morrison and Miller worked together on the script for The Flash, Morrison made it clear that the support for Miller has never wavered over the years. From these comments, they genuinely saw Miller as an immensely talented creator with a bright future ahead, and that these kinds of issues surrounding them wasn't something on the radar by any stretch. Just imagine Jack the Ripper. He probably had a day job, right? Nobody knew he was Jack the fucking Ripper. Doesn't mean he was a stand-up guy, right? From what Morrison said, Miller had seemingly isolated themselves for a long time after working on the script for The Flash, leaving the relationship in a state of uncertainty. While the DCEU moved forward, has the DCEU moved forward? I don't think so. Morrison is offering his support to Miller through this time is nothing to sneeze at, but it also puts into perspective just how serious things are for the troubled DCEU star at the moment. The future for Miller and the franchise as a whole remains uncertain, with Miller's controversy being only part of the reasons. But the hope is that Miller gets themselves in a good place, regardless of what happens on the big screen. So he makes a good point, this journalist here. He says, you know, the Miller situation isn't the only problem The Flash has. And I've explained to you that David Zaslav wanted some of the elements of this film to be reshot. Shall I give you a quick analogy about the inception of the DCEU? And if you don't know if that's a long word, Mick. Inception, that means the beginning, the creation. So imagine we've got Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon is a children's television network, right? And it programs for children. So they've just sacked their head leader, their president. So they make this insane decision to bring in the guy who directed a trilogy of porn movies over at Pornhub. Let's bring him over to Nickelodeon, and we want him to reboot Clarissa Tells All, right? So this porn director is going to lead this brand new franchise. He's going to godfather it. So this is my analogy for Christopher Nolan. So he brings in this other porn director called Big Zach, right? Big Zach, he's got the biggest cucumber in the world. He certainly knows how to act and direct in an adult movie. So instead of Clarissa being this teen-friendly person, she's actually going to be this serial killer, this temptress serial killer, right? And this is what they're going to make for children. This is, you see, at the end of the day, Christopher Nolan is a genius. The Dark Knight trilogy was amazing, and Zack Snyder is a great director. But they were both wrong to run a central, mainstream DC cinematic universe. That's my analogy. And from that moment, this company, from different heads and different company, members have tried to dig themselves out of this situation, and they cannot. And maybe the only solution will be to bring back that ultimate porn director, Big Zach, to finish off his story, and then, I don't know, start again or whatever, I don't know. Because it's certainly not working right now, and the Ezra Miller situation will continue to rumble on until they make a decision about this movie. Of course, the big problem with this movie is it resets the universe. It's so important, and it was a movie that could never go wrong. It has gone wrong, which means Walter Hamada's multiverse strategy is in the toilet. During the 7th season of Smallville, there was a Writers Guild strike. Now, this was a big problem for showrunners Alfred Gough and Miles Miller. Why? Because Michael Rosenbaum, John Glover and Christine Krug had decided they wanted to call it a day on the long-running pre-Superman show. So Alfred Gough and Miles Miller, when they came back after that strike, them and their writers had to go to work. They had to create an exit storyline for Lionel and Lex and Lana. So they, in terms of the Luthors, they came up with this magnificent Veritas storyline. And this storyline came out of nowhere. I mean, we all remember when Lex was in his office in the mansion, there was a window, stained glass, and there was a Veritas insignia in there when we came back after the writer's strike, but it wasn't there before, but they put it there to set up the art. I'm fine with it. It's just a little plot hole, but it's fun to see these things when you rewatch and watch and are obsessed with these things. So the Veritas storyline, I explained this a little bit on yesterday's DCEU Daily when we were having our little Smallville chat, tete-a-tete. So the Veritas storyline is about the Traveller and a group of rich families ready to collect the Traveller when he arrived from another planet. Obviously, the analogy is the Traveller is Clark Kent. Something went wrong. The reason Lionel Luthor was there on the day of the meteor shower was to take Clark before the rest of Veritas did. He killed most of the members of Veritas. Dr. Virgil Swan, the Teagues, and the Teagues and the Queens as well. Oliver Queen's parents were involved in this group, Veritas. So, and Lex knew nothing about it. But during season 7, he finds out. And there's a lot, it's very mythological, if you like, the Veritas thing. And it's so interesting. But then we get to one of my favourite episodes of Smallville and Janir television of all time, and that's Descent. Descent is a keeping of a promise from the pilot episode. How many times did you, as a Smallville fan, say Lex surely is going to kill Lionel? He's got to kill him. He is going to kill him, right? And journalists always used to ask Al and Miles, is Lex going to kill Lionel? And everyone used to smile and, we can't tell you. The opening sequence of this magnificent episode, Lex Luthor pushes Lionel Luthor out of Luthor Corp out of a high story window. But he doesn't just do it. So Lionel gets there in his limousine. He looks up. He looks a little bit frightened. He knows he's about to die. Why? Because Lionel wants Lex to kill him. It's all part of his manipulation. The manipulation in his plan he's been enacting since Smallville began. And in fact, before Smallville began, off screen as well, as a character. Because Lionel always had this Cain and Abel fantasy with Clark and Lex involved. It's him who manipulated that iconic Superman versus Lex Luthor dynamic in a way. So he wants Lex to kill him to become the man he's always wanted him to become. Because in the first couple of seasons, even third season really, Lex was resisting becoming the man Lionel wanted him to become, to be this ferocious villain, beast, killer, megalomaniac, because that's what Lionel Luthor was as well. But Lionel has found, has put together, this plan, and ultimately he manipulates Lex to enact the murder of his own father. Of course, Lionel had this coming. We discussed this yesterday as well. He electrocuted him. He wiped his mind. He did lots of things to Lex. He had this coming. He was a terrible father, but in his own way, his own sick and twisted way, he loved Lex. What I love about Smallville is the kind of comparison and analogy. You've got the abusive parent in Lionel Luthor, and then you've got the loving parents in Martha and Jonathan. And just by watching one episode of this show, especially in season 1, you can see the loving family within the Kents and that horrible, toxic, abusive dynamic within the Luthers. And I'll give you an example of this. There's an episode when they're stuck in Luther Corp, I think in the power plant, right? Do you remember the episode with Earl? And basically Lionel is embracing his son as a PR exercise at the end of the episode, while the Kents are embracing Clark in this loving way. And it just shows you the comparisons between an abusive family and a genuine loving family. And there's a reality there, because the world is full of abusive and loving families, and you just see these two families. Al Miles did a great job in that element, but being an abusive parent has consequences, just like we saw in the Joker movie when Arthur smothers his own mother. Now, we don't know if that's a fantasy or real, but let's get back to Smallville. But what happens in Smallville episode Descent, look, as I say, it's an amazing keeping of a promise. We talk about Game of Thrones season 8. We talk about the fact that fans felt betrayed. Well, I tell you what, I felt a little bit betrayed with the official Smallville series finale. But I tell you what, if Descent was actually the Smallville series finale, it would have fitted a lot better. This works on so many levels because, as I say, it's a keeping of a promise. So, as we see, as Lionel falls out the window when Lex pushes him, Lionel is plunging to his death, but he's smiling. Evidence that he always wanted this to happen. He wanted his own son to kill him. This is how twistedly obsessed he was with his Cain and Abel fantasy. I've never seen such a dynamic between two characters, a fascinating dynamic between a father and a son in Janir television. We certainly don't get writing, performances, and, making of Janir television like we did in this show. There were so many levels to it. You had Lana, you had Smallville High, but then you had the darkness of Lionel and Lex. And to have two magnificent actors like, John Glover and Michael Rosenbaum, I mean, these guys were killing it. People argue, well, you can't call Michael the best Lex because he had 7 years to kind of perfect his character. That may be so. But if you didn't have the ability and the writing wasn't there, it still would have been shit. So at the end of the day, whether you've got 6 months to 2 years to do something in a movie or, 7 seasons as Michael and John did, it doesn't matter. Because it was important that these exits of these iconic actors and characters in terms of Lex Luthor, Lionel Luthor and Lana Lang, it was very important they got those right. Because after season 7, Al Miles, the creators and showrunners for 7 seasons, were leaving the show as well. So they were going to get one of their other writers to run the show because they had fallen out with the CW and actually was suing WBTV, because there was a rights dispute for Smallville for several years as well. Bet you didn't know that. So Descent is a brilliant episode. But if you think that opening sequence is fucking awesome, then the episode after the title sequence is amazing, because that is just the pre-title sequence. Amazing. But then we get that amazing opening after the credits, at the Daily Planet. Clark's obsessed because, Lana's disappeared or I think Lana has been infected by Brainiac and they need to find Brainiac to cure her. So Clark doesn't care about anything else. But that's when Lionel's body is discovered and Clark has to be distracted from finding Brainiac to save Lana. Brilliant. Yes, we've got a pre-Superman story with a brilliant Brainiac in it as well. But that's another chat. As I said it on the top of the show, if you want me to talk about a Smallville episode, please let me know in the comments below. And so, yes, Clark is, of course, devastated by Lionel's death. And is suspicious that it's not an accident because that's what the police thinks it is. And so Clark goes on this little investigation, which I like because older Clark Kent at the Daily Planet, of course, is an investigative journalist. So I like that Smallville always did this in such a great way. Now, Chloe is not that suspicious of Lionel's death. And she says to Clark, why do you care? This guy was a really bad guy. But Clark is, again, this is Clark Kent. This is the future Superman. He cares about everyone, villains, heroes, or indifferent people. That's who Superman is. And Lionel, in the recent few years, felt like a father because that was part of Lionel's manipulation to get this Cain and Abel situation going. He befriended Clark. We never really knew if his, protection of Clark against Lex was genuine. Clearly, he never wanted Lex for a time to know who Clark was, but ultimately, by allowing him to kill him, the truth was going to come out, because Lex had been suspicious for years about Clark. I think he suspected Clark from the moment he saved him from the river in the pilot, because this is Lex Luthor. He's a criminal mastermind, so he can't be done. So I believe he suspected Clark all along, and I think he continued the friendship with Clark for that reason. I believe there was a time that he loved Clark and respected Clark and felt him to be like a brother, but he had other ulterior motives as well. And slowly in this episode, what you see Lex finally becoming the Lex Luthor from the comics and the movies, but mainly the comics. There's a great moment, if we skip along the episode, when, he can see his younger self. So what he's doing here is having a battle between his soul. His soul is battling, there's a battle for his soul. So there's the modern day Lex, who's basically evil megalomaniac Lex now, and then there's the kid. That's the good side of him. And there's a fight, and the kid's saying, go to Clark. Clark can help us. Clark loves us. So it's very emotional, and it's beautiful. In fact, is it that season where we have an episode earlier on where Clark goes into the mind of Lex Luthor? Another amazing episode, very emotional. Clark gets to see what it's like to be Lex Luthor and the horrible experiences that he has. Again, an evil megalomaniac doesn't just become an evil megalomaniac. There are reasons for it. Now, a lot of people on different political sides don't agree with that, but I love that element of the story. So there's this battle for Lex's soul during this episode, Descent. As I say, a brilliant episode. And it's amazing. And, I love the bit at the end when Lex doesn't allow anyone to go to Lionel's funeral. I don't know if he's trying to punish Clark or Lionel, but Clark turns up after the funeral or during whatever, because there's no service, and it's brilliant. You see them both standing opposite each other, and Lex just smiles. And I'm not sure if he's smiling because he feels that he's won, or that he's glad that Clark's there. Because as I say, there is a love. This version of Lex and Clark, Lex Luthor loves Clark as a brother. Yes, he's kept that relationship going because he's fascinated by him and he's suspicious of him, right? But he loves Clark. And that's another element of this storyline, because this is what I was trying to explain yesterday. When you change canon, and if you do it for the best, it's good. But if you change canon and you do it for the worst and for the worst reasons, that's where people get frustrated. Well, changing the canon, Lex Luthor and Clark Kent in the Superman era won't just be enemies. They'll have all this Smallville history. That's why I regret they never did a Metropolis spin-off show after Smallville. For me, they should have done 5 years of Smallville and 5 years of Metropolis. With the history of Smallville backing it, it would have been the best live-action Superman television show of all time. But this is what Descent does. It's a beautiful episode, but it's bittersweet, because we lose one of the greatest Smallville actors of all time, and after that he's dead. He turns up as another worldly version in the final season of Smallville, but he's played in a different way, and it's not the same Lionel. So losing Lionel was very hard for me, because I loved him. He was just great fucking television. I'll never forget him poisoning Genevieve Teague's whiskey or whatever, and standing there as she's struggling to live, and he's dangling the cure over to her, and he just wants the element. That was John Glover's Lionel Luthor at his fucking best. This guy loved fucking being evil, and we loved watching him being evil. But Descent is just a fine example. If you're a Superman fan and haven't watched Smallville, you are missing out on the Bible of Superman. This has been the DCEU Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again for Saturday's DCEU Daily. Until then, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.